Okay, let's move on to the next issue we've got to do with this graphing. And this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. And I am out right now with COVID, and this is the first time I've had COVID. And this is the first time I've had to get a substitute in something like 20 years. So this really feels strange for me to be at home instead of at school. Anyway, so here's all the things we're finding. So we're going to move on and do the phase shift next. So if you think about what we've been doing so far, we've been having our graphs, and we have always been graphing these points. On the positive side, we keep graphing these points. So we're saying to ourselves, okay, I've always got, I shouldn't say I've always, but this is the format we're working with. Okay, so what's going to happen is this guy here is going to become our phase shift. Now, everything we've done so far has been like nice and easy, just sine X. There hadn't been any change there. So the center of the graph, and I know deep down it's really not a center because it's infinite. So it's really not a center, but it's the point we start with has always been 0 because that's the 0 of what I call the X part of the problem. So now we're going to start doing a phase shift, which is the X part of the problem. So if I did something like this, just something real easy, if I said something like X minus pi over 4. See, now what would make this go to 0? See, that's like adding pi over 4 to this. What makes this go to 0? To get 0 here, X would need to be pi over 4. To get 0, X would need to be pi over 4. So that's like saying this guy needs to be pi over 4 now to get 0 there. So the next piece has to be something to get pi over 2. So the next piece would have to be 3 pi over 4. The next piece to get pi would have to be 5 pi over 4. So you're thinking, well, how am I supposed to figure all that out? Well, here's the way we're going to do it, and it's very straightforward. All right. Every time we do one of these graphs, we know that we put the center on there and we do one period to the right, one period to the left. So think to yourself, the center has always been 0, the 0 of the X part, the 0 of the X part. Well, now the 0 of the X part is a phase shift. So the phase shift now becomes the center. So the phase shift, this is what I'm going to call it all the time. The phase shift is the new center of the graph. The phase shift is the new center of the graph. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to put the y-axis on there yet. I'm going to put that pi over 4 in the center because that's the 0. Pi over 4 makes that X part go to 0, which is what we want to make the center. Okay. Now we still hadn't changed the period. Our period is still 2 pi. So we're going to say to ourselves, all right, so my endpoint needs to be 2 pi spaces. So my endpoint on this side is going to be pi over 4 plus 2 pi. So 9 pi over 4. And my endpoint on this side, I'm going the other way, it's going to be pi over 4 minus 2 pi. So negative 7 pi over 4. Then we got to fill all this in. So we say to ourselves, all right, there's a bunch of ways to do this. Like if you do the basic way, what's halfway between pi over 4 and 9 pi over 4? You add them together, divide by 2. So that'd be 10 pi over 4. Cut in half would be 5 pi over 4. This would be negative 6 pi over 4. Cut in half would be negative 3 pi over 4. Then somebody says, all right, we can figure this out. So negative 10 over 4. So that's negative 5 over 4. Negative 2 over 4. So that's negative 1 over 4. 3 over 4. And 7 over 4. So now you've got your 9 labels that we're going to need every time. Now what's going to happen is we're going to need to do this every time. by the way, one of the other methods some people like to do is we're chopping these up. We're chopping each period up into 4 pieces. So if the period is 2 pi and we're chopping it into 4 pieces, that means each interval is pi over 2. So if I know that endpoint is negative 7 pi over 4, then I'm just going to add pi over 2 each time. So negative 7 pi over 4 plus pi over 2. Well, pi over 2 would be 2 over 4. So 7 over 4, negative 7 over 4 plus 2 over 4 plus 2 over 4 plus 2 over 4, blah, blah, blah. So there's lots of different ways to work this out. All right. And what I like to do is when I put that pi over 4 in there, that's my new center of the graph. That's my new center of the graph. And so for this example here, I just made it easy. So the amplitude is 1. So we're going up from 1 to negative 1. It's positive. There's really no changes here. So when we sketch the graph, just like we always do, so sine curves always start right there in the center. Positive sine curves go up, max, center, min, center, min, center, max, center. So we get our graph. And you're thinking, okay, how much does all this really affect? Well, here's what it affects. The restricted domain, what we're calling our restricted domain, which is our endpoints, is just negative 7 pi over 4 to 9 pi over 4. So that's about in terms of answering all these questions, that's about the only big deal there. See what I'm saying? So, all right, I'm going to do another example. This is the basics of it. I'm going to do another example, make another video and do another example. All right, and cough a whole lot in between.